our last session with a quotation from Pascal, which I think is very telling. He says in one of his writings that man never does evil so completely and cheerfully as when he does it through religious conviction. Our topic right through has been religious conviction and reason. And tonight we're trying to wind up things in a way that will bring you to realize that we didn't begin at any stage. Isn't that marvelous? So those of you who are really sincere about this course, you will ask me, please fail me. I want to do this credit next year. I'm not sure whether it's legal to do the credit next year if you pass it this year. I doubt if the registrar would let you. How many candidates have I for failing? Okay. So I'm going to begin with Pascal. Let's make our list as usual. Our impossible list. Okay. Pointers from Pascal. And the first one was that quotation about evil. The curious, according to him, the curious fact that religious conviction generates oppression and evil cheerfully. The second point from Pascal is, let's put it down, reasons of the heart. And the third pointer from Pascal is, all right, Pascal plus another strange Frenchman, Fermat. And let's put it this way. On probability. That will be our little initial exercise. Secondly, we're going to talk about transformations. And displacements. Individual and communal. Thirdly, we're going to talk about desire. And I'm quoting from the Rig Veda, the primal seed and germ of spirit. Fourthly, I'm going to talk about cosmos and self as beautiful. Question mark. Fifthly, this is the exciting part. It's about the examination. The incomplete examination of the incomplete self. And just for the heck of it, I'll put in self-project. And finally, sixth place, final foci. Now, I wonder, will we get there? Well, I'll certainly make a point of getting to number 5. Usually this is a revision class. You're at the end of the course and you want to revise and you want to get ready for the exam, and you want it to be complete, and let's see it all hang together. And I want to do the opposite. I want to shake it up so that we actually have a sense of not having begun. And this is a very difficult sense to generate in our culture. You will find, and perhaps I should do it immediately, that this does connect up with a final survey of the book process. I needn't connect in the book Wealth because they connect insufficiently together from references, cross-references. So in discussing transformations and displacement, you'll find I'm talking about chapter 3 and chapter 4, the individual. Transformations of the individual. And we began the course talking about that, illustrating it, people who climb and so on. And more recently we've been talking about the community, especially in that transformation that is associated with these 8 functional specialties, this way of recollecting the past and moving to the future. This section you can connect with chapter 5 of the book, and it brings back the problem to the question of desire in the Rig Veda, which is probably the earliest collection of literary works in the Indo-European tradition. So this is way back before, say, the Psalms of Desire of the Hebrew tradition. Cosmos and Self as Beautiful. There's a sense in which this brings you back to the beginning of chapter 2 and the problem of bit-by-bit discovery. The incomplete examination of the incomplete self. Well, I could say this brings you right back to chapter 1 and to that curious Indian detective in the first section, Inspector Goethe, who goes fishing. If you like, it brings you forward also to chapter 1 of St. John. And the final foci, I suppose, brings you to the epilogue and the afterword, or afterwards. Now, people's achievement in the course varies. Some of you have gone through the book. Some of the very enthusiastic people who happen to not be doing 5 credits, but say 1 or 2, read the whole book in the first week or so, and now are beginning to get into focus on the difficulty of it. Some of you are still stuck in section 2.5. That's terrific. I talked last day about the minimal coverage. Well, what's the minimal coverage? I think you might get a pass in the course if you read page 100 of process. And you connect that with wealth, page 15 and page 48. Now, I'll get to that topic when we get to the incomplete examination of the incomplete self. Okay, the pointers from Pascal, and these are pointers for your reflection. We're not closing any of these reflections, but that is a curious statement of Pascal's, that men do evil most completely and cheerfully when it comes from a religious conviction. The Inquisition, the Crusades, the general wars of religion. Okay, the question I'm raising, and I have been raising it right through the course, is the nature of religious conviction and the possibility of identifying when it's genuine. And Pascal does not put religious conviction in inverted commas. He doesn't say men do evil cheerfully and completely when they have a religious conviction, ho ho. But I'm doing it. Just to raise a question. The point I made about religious conviction, you're convicted by religion, I brought out by a very simple diagram that you are a human being and you have a conviction. And I think the measure of the genuineness of that conviction is that the conviction rests easily with the quest. That you don't stop being a whatter. Okay, in other words, we'll see it in more detail here. It does not somehow cut off your humanity. So there's conviction and openness. And then there's the difficulty of knowing who's religious and who's not religious. It's not by going to church or not going to church. Is this person genuine? Is this person open? Are they really in the cosmos? Or is there some sort of closed offness? Okay, and that, one could spell that out in relation of the evil. By their works you shall know them. One of the works of the human subject is the search for ideas. The contemplative effort just to be human, so to speak, in place. That's one of the reasons I emphasized art. And there's a way in which that's so hard to justify. Even spontaneously in conversation. You meet somebody on Monday and you say, well, what did you do at the weekend? And they say, oh, well, I drove up to Cape Breton and I took a run around the Cabot Trail and I went out on a boat and I saw the whales and I came back down last night and I stopped off and had a nice dinner. And what did you do? And you say, well, I stayed at home and listened to Mozart. Oh, you didn't go anywhere. I just contemplated. That's all I did. So that's a work. So there's a way in which you can twist the, by their works you shall know them, around this topic of, well, this is the work of man. Remember our second and third session when I talked about what? What is man? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you got it? What is being human? Take that as an answer. It's like that old joke, how high is a Chinaman? Huh? Yeah, he is. Okay. You got that? Okay, so what? We are whatters. Okay, so that's the question of religious conviction. What is it? It would seem that one of the signs of authenticity is an openness to the cosmos and to the other and to the strangeness of the other, to a level of tolerance that doesn't seem to be associated with a lot of the religious traditions. Okay, the second point from Pascal, the phrase from Pascal is that the heart has reasons of which the reason reason knows nothing. And the point I would emphasize there is the knowing of nothing. It's not that the heart has reasons and you stop. It's almost the same point again, that you go on, but nescience, non-science, not knowing, and therefore mystery, is a huge element in this heartiness. And again, you have a question of a contemplative stillness. Be still. You have the possibility of stasis. We're going to do an exercise down here from Joyce. That's one of our exercises tonight. The discussion Joyce has of what is the beautiful, and he talks about the stasis, the pause, the enchantment of the heart, that there is a reason beyond reason in some very profound sense in which you rest, but it also invites within you towards the quest. Okay, that sounds enormously maybe suggestive of various religious traditions, suggestive of prayer. And to bring it from those zones to the concrete reality of the challenge of reason and religious belief, I go to the third pointer from Pascal. We talked about evil, talked about nescience, and what, says you, what could this have to do with that? Okay. I presume that question has occurred to you. And again, some of you are saying, oh God, not mathematics again. Yeah. But this is a marvelous illustration of a variety of elements within this course. We're talking about reason and religious belief, about faith and thinking, or faith and understanding. And there's a sense in which we're talking about theology, the word that comes from faith. And what I'm emphasizing by drawing on Pascal is that the word that comes from faith is a word that comes from understanding, and not a word of the nominalist creed, of vicious inquisition, of oppression, of human arrogance. One of the reasons I took 1904 was that in a certain sense it was a laugh about human arrogance in the most simple science of physics. Now this little exercise may help you to laugh a little more. You've got to hold on to your sense of humor. Fermat and Pascal. Fermat was a very brilliant mathematician. There's still a theorem of Fermat's which he claims to have proved, and nobody has managed it since. Okay, Fermat and Pascal got together on a problem of betting. Two gamblers betting for a certain number of points or a certain pot, and they stopped the game at a certain stage, and one of the players wrote to, was it Fermat or, yes, it was to Pascal, how would we divide the pot? So Pascal and Fermat started working on this, and they corresponded, and they worked very hard. Pretty well for the length of our course, okay? I like that notion. It says at the bottom of the page here, at the top it says, it is customary without any quibbling to regard Pascal and Fermat as the founders of mathematical probability. Which really is a matter of finding out what does that mean, except they were inventing this. And at the bottom of this page in this history of mathematics, it says that the principles were laid down by Fermat and Pascal in about 3 months by a painstaking application of uncommon sense. Now, that's worth thinking about. This is a pointer from Pascal. This guy this guy's bright. So is Fermat. And it takes them 3 months. It takes them the length of our course to do this exercise. How does that grab you? Isn't it a weird notion? Doesn't it strike you as strange? We've got two of the geniuses of the 17th century figuring out something. Now, and they did figure it out, and that figuring out is still available on paper. But recall all our work about science and the bypassing of mind and the omission of insight and technique, that you can dodge thinking by using technique. Remember the puzzle that I was going to give $20 to anyone who figured out how to multiply with your fingers? You remember that way back when you were young? Yeah. 8 8s are 64 and so on. That nobody wrote into me and told me why this worked, but it works. Okay, the problem of the history of probability since is that the meaning achieved by these chaps is not the meaning that dominates the use of statistics in our culture or in our textbooks, so that in fact there's a pretentious overreach, a covered-up omniscience in our modern studies of statistics. Okay, let's spell that out, not in terms of the textbooks. Some of you have done that stats course, have you? Yes? But in terms of common sense. So instead of taking heads and tails, tossing a penny, what's the probability of heads turning up? Yeah? Come on, risk it. Is it half? Yeah? There you are. Well, it's not. Let's say you're going down to the VG for an operation and you're just going under with the anesthetic, and the doctor leans over you and says, don't worry, the chances of you dying in this operation is 100 to 1. Don't you feel good? Yeah, come on, don't you? It's 100 to 1. Honestly, yeah? It cheers you up. And you're just going under, and he says, the last 99 lived. Okay. In our conversations, in our mathematical studies, there's a predominant perspective of predicting the particular, which has nothing to do with what these two chaps worked out. What did these two chaps work out? Again, this is very light-hearted discussion. Where did the half turn up? The half turns up if you toss the penny long enough, okay? Isn't that fair enough? Yeah? What does the half mean? It doesn't mean that it's either heads or tails. It means that if you toss the penny often enough, you'll get heads and tails unless there are two heads on the penny. And it won't be regular. And you might get a whole lot of heads. But the proposal is that if you toss the penny long enough, you'll find that roughly half are heads. Does that make sense? Yeah? So what does the half mean for Pascal and Fermat? It means, I can write it out perhaps in a little fancier, that the limit as the number of tosses becomes indefinitely large, that's the sign for infinity, of the number of heads, okay, is the number of heads over the number of heads and tails. And that limit is a half. Okay? Now, you may have to think that out. I know the first time I worked on this, it took me a month, so I can't help you that much. But that is what is meant by the probability of heads is a half. Now, if you examine our normal common sense language and textbooks, you'll find there's a tendency to talk about what's the probability of, and then you take, say, 3 cows and their calves or whatever, and you're jumping pretentiously to talk about things about which you know nothing. Let's take a very simple illustration of black and white, say, billiard balls in a bag. Okay? So you've got a bag of billiard balls, or a vat, and in fact it's a bag of black and white, and you know that there are 1,000 black billiard balls and there's only one white billiard ball. Now, you're going to dip into the bag. What's the probability of getting a white billiard ball? 1,000 to 1. Yeah, straight away, that's what we say. What does that mean? Nothing. Suppose you put in your hand, you've bet your shirt on it, you know. You put in your hand and you pick out the white one. Well, are you surprised? Well, yeah, you may be a little shocked. You've lost your shirt. Now, I'm not going to, it takes normally in classes, a couple of classes, to get people to think this through so that they really notice that there is no connection. That you're using the word probably here in a quite wrong sense. Probability means that you have a lot of instances and that you find out that the distribution is, in this case, half white, or half heads, half tails. Now, I'm going to leave you with that exercise. I think it's a wonderful exercise. What's the point of it? The point of it is to bring to your notice a mistake that is quite common in our culture, whether it's weather forecasting. I recall on the old Star Trek, Mr. Spock was endlessly giving probabilities for particular occasions. Yeah? Captain Kirk would say, what is the probability of us being able to arrive at this planet by noon tomorrow? And Mr. Spock would say, well, it's 56.345 approximately. Remember that? Yeah? Any old Trekkies here? So I'm suggesting that this is a nonsense statement. And the genuine statement is, I just don't know. Take yourself going in for the operation. Okay? You're going into for an operation, and the statistics tell you. What do they tell you? They tell you nothing about you. Okay? Is that fair enough? 99% of people recover from taking out appendix, okay? What does that tell you about you in this operation? Nothing. Okay, so there's a common way of talking that is especially dominant at this stage in the 20th century. It runs through courses in statistics, it runs through common speech, it runs through weather forecasting. Earlier in this course, or was it at the end of last year, I heard of the shift to using computerized analysis of probability of patients surviving in hospitals in America, and it will be a piece of the institution by the end of the century. It's an overreach, a pretentious overreach of the human subject. One just does not know. Doctor, will I recover from this? I don't know. That's what the doctor might say. But to tell you that, well, 99% of people come through very nicely. And then after the operation, doctor comes over and says, sorry, you're dead. Okay. Now, the relevance of the exercise is to bring out a point about the nature of reflection on faith. I'm trying to avoid, well, I shouldn't, I suppose, I'm trying to avoid the word theology. In what sense is theology queen of science? I might say queen of reason. That brings in the arts. Theology is not a subject in the library, okay? It has to be people. Is that fair enough? Theology means, and so queen has to be some woman. What is the place of theology, a reflection on faith that somehow is serious and scientific? The place of that reflection, and again get back to the conviction, the conviction within a person who's in the cosmos and who is human, and yet that humanity is an empty desire. The conviction is related to the friendliness of the cosmos, and theology is a search for understanding of that friendship. It's a spontaneous search. We can't but move to insight. Now, we talked in the course about the fact that that spontaneity can get cut off. An entire culture can invite you not to get any insight. You're memorizing your way through school classes, university classes. But there is the spontaneity within the subject, searching for understanding. Within faith, and let's take the Christian tradition at the moment, you have a conviction that relates to understanding. You recall 2 sessions ago that we talked about this in Aristotle, understanding, and that the identification of this in the Christian tradition. And if you like, take the phrase, be ye perfect as the Heavenly Father is perfect. And what is that perfection? Understanding. And there's a way in which the conviction within the tradition grounds, or should ground, an attitude of open searching and a hope of understanding. Being human means reaching for understanding. Not being human means killing this off. And the killing off can be either the very clear evil of Inquisition, crusade, whatever, or the less clear evil of avoiding admitting that you're nescient. I just don't know, the doctor said. I mentioned earlier one of my friends in Boston, in one of the universities, started a seminar for professors, and he told me that it took him 2 years to get some of them to say, I don't know. The function of the theologian then is to face this task in the cosmos of understanding and inviting people to understand. Those of you who are, and there are some of you, dabbling in Bernard Lonergan's insight will find that this is a discussion that dominates the end of the book. So the theologian then is somebody who is actually inviting a more serious effort of reason, faith-seeking understanding. What sort of an understanding is that? Not a narrow little grubbing around at the dogmas of the church, but an understanding of the cosmos. I recall talking to Bernard Lonergan in 1961 about the state of theology after the Reformation. We never did get into that topic of what happened after 1277. Well, it's not terribly exciting. But certainly after the 16th century, there was an enclosing of reflection on faith. And his summing up of it was that eventually the professors of theology were just big frogs in little ponds, not reflecting on the cosmos, but thinking narrowly about a conviction in a way that fits into my criticism that was it really religious? Are you really open to the cosmos? Are you asking about whether it's mathematics or physics, chemistry? And I won't go on to illustrate the failures of certainly Western Christendom to follow up this. Okay, so that's some lessons from Pascal. And we'll see later that that invitation to understanding is a dominant problem in our present situation in theology. However, let's get back to us as individuals. And at this stage, I'm going to try and revise certain aspects of the course. Transformations. Now, I talked about transformations before. What's a transformation? It's like the transformation of the tadpole to the frog. What's the transformation, the basic transformation in this course? Well, you started off, those of you who never did philosophy before, you started off and there you were, happily innocent of your elements. You were in your element and not knowing it, okay? And I tried to persuade you to drop the course and you didn't. Oh well. What's the transformation? Well, if it occurred, the transformation is the twist represented by this twist of becoming interested in yourself. And this is very difficult. A lot of you have been successful in this because you weren't educated in, say, another type of philosophy. Sometimes I get a person in class and they've done a lot of British analytic philosophy, and it's very hard to teach them. I recall Albert the Great's notion of 3 types of people that do not benefit from a teacher. There's the person who's just too brilliant, too bright, doesn't need a teacher. And then there's the person who's so slow. And then he says, another type, the person who from long study of the law is incapable of being taught. Well, there's a way in which if you're taught enough philosophy in the popular sense, you can be educated out of your mind. You'll find in the epilogue of Process I discuss one of my experiences of trying to teach a professor. It's very difficult to tell somebody who has been tutored not to notice themselves that they're not noticing themselves, okay? Now, as I say, some of you have bounced along remarkably. I certainly didn't do it that way in my first 3 months. By not being biased, by noticing that, yeah, if I attend to myself, then I discover, and again, this is beginning to make a lot more sense to you, I discover about myself insights. We got the first 4 elements of meaning here, but notice the twist. This mess isn't just sense. There's a mess, and it's me. To get you to attend to the mess that is me, that's a terrific achievement, yeah? As they say in a bad translation from Gaelic, do you feel proud out of yourself? Okay, puzzling over the mess that is me and saying, golly, what am I? That's the question, what? I am, okay, and we can draw our 5-level diagram, 13 elements. Do we all remember them at this stage? Yeah, roughly. Could we all write them down in the right order? I am sensitive. I've got sensibility. I am a whatter. I'm an isser. I'm a what-to-doer. I'm an am-I-to-doer. And I'm going to add a little bit here just to tease you. These are levels, okay? And we've named these levels, we've talked about these levels, and I'm just throwing out a further hint, and I'm going to put an arrow upwards, just to confuse you. Okay, but now the elementary transformation is that at this stage, after our 12 weeks, how far have you got? Oh, despair, thorough confusion. Well, at least you're able to identify these vaguely, yeah? But yeah, when you think of it, illustrate it from your own life, yeah? Sensibility. You remember our nice illustration of Emma on the beach. You move up from just being vaguely conscious to what's that noise? Is it Emma drowning? What am I going to do? Yeah, we're on the move. Okay. And that's all the transformation I expect. That you actually can name. Let's put in the 4 insights. And these 4 inner words we talked about. And they're inner and they're invisible. But their absence is easily shown. Their absence betrays itself by the way a person handles problems. Okay? You ask somebody, what do you mean by that? Says the professor is teaching. And the professor teaches and talks. I'm thinking back on the history of some of the professors I had one old professor who was using another professor's notes. The other professor was dead. And some of the markings, like shout here, the argument's weak. That same old professor once was reading through the notes. They were in Latin. And one bright student asked a question, and the professor looked at him. This is serious. He was reading down through the notes. And he looked up and he said, that's a marvelous question. There might be something about it further on. Oh dear, okay. So these may be invisible, but it becomes shockingly manifest when you ask somebody, would you give me illustrations of that? Tease it out some other way. There's the question of the rhetorician in the Gorgias with Socrates, but more up to date, there's the person who comes in and says, I'm a really good tennis coach. And you find that they're sitting out on the court with a book. I don't know what to do next. The inner word is a controlling thing like this project. You understand tennis in such a way that you can clue in the person on a bad move. You understand the cooking, yeah? Julia Child on a good day. So these are inner words. Now, I've invited you to identify these. I don't think at this stage that you can do much more than that. Be able to number these 13. But to be able to actually name parts of yourself that are really yourself, that's terrific. That's a lot in 13 weeks. What has boggled some people is that we haven't accumulated a lot of information. One student picked out a book out of the shelves here on art last week, and we had talked about art. We hadn't covered anything of this book. It was a history of views on art. Now, we didn't do any of those, but had we done it, you would have been very well informed. Well, what is art? Well, Kant says this, and Hume says that, and Plato said this, and Aristotle said that. But have you discovered anything? The problem is formation instead of information. Does that make sense? That you are not well versed now in the philosophy of religion. I keep getting these books in the post, and I sometimes wonder, will I bring over the pile to the class? Surveys, encyclopedias, philosophy of religion. We could have got into the information thing. But the key thing is the formation. Who am I that has convictions? And what is a conviction? And what is it to puzzle about a conviction? Well, the first thing is to find out what's what, and what's what, I'm what. So the first transformation then is that elementary move towards naming these parts of oneself. Very little. This superficial half credit may have got you that far, so don't be discouraged. Think of Pascal and Fermat. Think of 13 weeks at the piano. Why do we expect so much? This business of covering courses. I'm doing all of Shakespeare in one course, and I'm doing most of French literature in another one, and wow. Okay, so a nominal appreciation, little appreciation of oneself as of this structure. That's the transformation. And that is a peak at a peak, in that you are a peak. You're an infinite mystery. But the course, insofar as I've described it now, can be an achievement. Okay? You've got this far. Now, what I want to do is to point beyond to other transformations And it'll bring out a point that we've come up against regularly, the point of openness to transformations in others. Recall our discussion of Beethoven and Emma. As I said, I like a big diagram for Beethoven and then a little one for Emma. In chapter 3, I talk about some of these. And perhaps the dominant quotation, I think you'll find it on page 111 in Process. It's a quotation from Mary Evans. Some of you may know as George Eliot, Middlemarch, about a developed sensitivity to hear the grass growing and so on. And the end of the quotation is, as it is, most of us are well wadded with stupidity. And the problem is to acknowledge that, and then to acknowledge that in spite of that stupidity and waddedness, we are in great company. Taking the Christian dimension in, we are in the greatest company. But in the normal secular sense, we are in great company. Yeah? Beethoven, Glenn Gould, so on. And these greats are people who reach transformations that are quite beyond us. Okay? The transformations I'm talking about are transformations that carry somebody into a world of beauty that's quite remote from us. It's an artistic transformation. And it displaces the person. You've got, let me write this down, transformations, displacements. Some of you are reading Lonergan's work in this context, and you will not find these words in the same way in his writings. You will find two other words, differentiation and conversion. These are bigger words, well, they're broader in scope. It gets you out of, say, the Christian talk of conversion into, if you like, a neutral word, a displacement. But conversion, say, in the question of beauty, you have a transformation insofar as, say, you start learning the piano at the age of 6, then you become transformed, and you may become displaced in that you're in a different world in the presence of, say, piano music. You're really spaced out. It's a conversion, it's a turning around. But you can have other displacements, which this word covers, that are not here, because you have perversions and so on. There's the massive displacement of evil that Pascal talks about, sin generating evil, the Machiavellian world in which we live. Wasn't Machiavelli an Italian Catholic? Okay, but the point is that what I'm talking about now is not part of the course, and the key thing is to notice that now we're looking at a map. What are we doing in the course? This. And we've done it a little bit. What am I doing now? I'm pointing, peeking beyond. That there are people who so move into the world of beauty, whether it's music, literature, sculpting, that they are displaced. They live in a different place. And there's a sense in which we don't respect them. Similarly, the world of understanding, which is the world of science, of which there are not that many scientists, insofar as you work hard enough, you are displaced. There's a sense in which it becomes the real world, and you're in Plato's problem. Insofar as you pursue this topic, which is the dynamics of truth search, then there is the displacement that can be called methodological. And there's the displacement here. I'll put down the word scholarship, which is related to venture or adventure. Scholarly displacement is when you can appreciate the other as different. We're going to talk about that a little more when I talk about the community. And there's the displacement of love, and again the transformation, if you like, say, courtship, take love in that sense, leading to a displacement, a falling in. And there's a displacement, and I'm just putting this in to tease you, of ecstasy. And you'll notice there's a pun here. I like this. I was talking about intimacy and ultimacy, and here I've got ecstasy. And those of you who are in the Christian tradition may notice that there's a nice little pun in this. Joyce would love it. There's an ecstasy that is part of our reach beyond us.